Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of Verta Stars Podcast fourth season. My loyal listeners, thank you for continued support. This is an amazing episode because Ryan North returns to the mothership to discuss One World Under Doom from Marvel Comics. Now, come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. North. Thank you for coming to Verta Stars Podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So, you've been the writer of Fantastic Four since 2023. So, how has all this Fantastic Four writing prepared you to write One World Under Doom?
Whew. Um, that's a good question. I feel like the closest I have to an answer for that is Fantastic Four #7 was a Doom story that was told from his point of view. It was an extra large issue, I think maybe double sized. Um, and I realized when writing that issue, well, I didn't realize it, I knew it, but it crystallized that Doom is not like other villains in that other bad guys can go up against Fantastic Four, and Fantastic Four will beat them, and the villain will be like, "Well, you punched me enough, and I will stop doing crimes now." But Doom is not that guy. Doom is someone who, even when he loses, he extracts something from the victors. It made me realize how, Doctor Doom is a man who has never said in his life. He always knows precisely what he wants to say. And as a writer, that lets you shift into this more oratorial register that wouldn't really scan for many other play and many other characters. It would feel fake or prepared or somehow heightened. But with Doom, it works. With Doom, he can be this guy who speaks wonderfully, who can always be eloquent in a way that I'm failing to be right now because he's always thought out what he wants to say in advance. So I mean, he's a great character. And I think writing writing with Squirrel Girl, writing with Fantastic Four, uh, helped me solidify my idea of who this man is, which of course comes in handy when you're writing a giant event about him.
So, I mean, has it been since issue 7 that you've been building toward this series, or is this something that kind of came up? Editorial was like, "Hey, by the way, let's do this," or were you knowingly building towards this for a couple of years?
We first started talking about it in 2003, I believe. So the story's been on my mind since then. Um, did outlines, did full drafts of all the issues. So that was something I really wanted to hit was I've done events before, tying into events with Fantastic Four, with Squirrel Girl, and my experience there was I would have liked to know exactly what was going on. I get the outline, I know sort of vaguely what's happening, but I wouldn't know exactly what's happening. And so by writing the full issue in advance, pardon me, I could give other writers the scripts and be like, here's exactly what's happening in this moment. So it is something that's been in the works for a while. It's been something that I've had a plan for a long time, and it's great to finally see it start come out now.
So the opening page, the open monologue, is really interesting. Is that something you've been planning for a while, or is that something that maybe current events have kind of helped to crystallize for you? How
Oh
that went?
no, no, that opening monologue was one of the first things I wrote back in when I started thinking about the project, sort of crystallize where Doom's coming from it. Um, and yeah, it's been something that's I've carried through every draft because I liked how it positioned Doom of here's a guy who's like, you know what? The world has problems and I can do it better. And I can do it better. How? Because I'm Doctor Doom. I'm better than everyone. I'm above everyone. And you know what? I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to take over the world, run everything for you because I'm that good of a guy. He obviously says it in a much nicer way, but that's sort of the gist of what he's saying, which sounds great if you are Doctor Doom. If you are not Doctor Doom and think maybe this guy has some ulterior motives, maybe he's not to be trusted. Um, it can read as a little more sinister.
Because I was thinking, because some of the dialogue when you mentioned, about two countries that are alike will never attack one another. Um, and there's another part in there about I think even sharing the same like fast food would never attack one another, something along those lines is in the opening monologue. And I was thinking how prescient to how some of the dangers we're walking into now. Um, and it just felt, I mean, is it prescient because truth is truth, or is it weirdly our world is now a comic book?
They're actually both older ideas dating the 20th century. The idea that democracies won't go to war with each other was something we told ourselves as a truth that turned out not to be true. The idea that I forget, I think it's called the McDonald's doctrine. The idea that countries that had McDonald's in them wouldn't go to war with each other because capitalism would be such a strong force to prevent that from happening because war is bad for business.
Hmm.
Also not true. But what I liked about both those ideas is there's this real optimism to it. The idea that we have finally structured the world such that war is impossible. And it felt great to have someone like Doom, who is not a great guy, but a well-educated man. He knows a lot of stuff, to gesture towards these doctrines and be like, no, you know they didn't work. You tried it and you failed. Now here I am with the only real option, which is put me in charge of everything.
So I think the interesting thing about Doom being in charge is is it better or worse if he turns out to be right?
I mean, we've got nine more issues for that. Um, but I think what Doom is doing here, he's acting as a global dictator. He's acting as a fascist, and I think part of any uh, honest reckoning with those ideas, the idea of what if there was one guy who would fix everything for us? That fantasy, part of the honest reckoning of that fantasy is that you have to admit, if you buy in, it's a really seductive fantasy. The idea that the right person with all the power could just fix everything for us. It has an appeal. And so I wanted to show that appeal of someone like Doom showing up and doing all this stuff that you might think is good, and then trying to get you onto his side. That's the structure of the whole first issue. Is he keeps saying like only Doom can save you, only Doom can save you. By the end of the issue, he has this member of the public, this woman he rescues, saying it back to him, only Doom can save us, which shows it's working.
Well, also in the opening monologue that he says he describes himself as above bribery, above corruption, above petty comforts. How much of that is true in a sense? How much of it, because he obviously he is a ruler of Latveria, he's is incredibly wealthy on his own right. How much of it is just what he either wants others to believe, or how much is he trying to convince himself that he's that good of a person?
Yeah, I feel like I can't answer that without spoiling the story. Um, yeah, I'm sorry to sort of pass on that question, but a lot of what the story does is starts digging into that and being like, is he telling the truth? What does he believe? Where does the truth lie? That sort of stuff. So by the end of the story, you'll have an answer for sure. I don't want to give it away just now.
How can, well, I think it poses an interesting question. How can someone so smart be so incredibly wrong about himself?
Yeah, and I think the answer to that question um, has four letters, and those four letters are R, E, E, and D. The core of what I perceive, who I perceive Doom to be, is that here is a man who has an incredible will and an incredible mind and a lot of gifts, a lot of ambitions. He's a great strategist. And in any other world where Reed Richards didn't exist, I think he would go down a very different path. But Reed is someone who is just a little bit smarter than him, just a little bit better. And that is intolerable. That is a splinter under his nail that he can't get rid of, and it's just consuming him. And on the flip side of that, Reed is someone who sees Doom and sees all this potential, sees a like mind, sees someone who could, if he applied himself in the right ways, really operate on his level. And for him, I don't think he'll ever give up hope that Victor Von Doom can become the man that Reed sees him having the potential to be. And so with that, those two men who see so much of themselves in the other and both are unwilling to move past that for different reasons, it's a really interesting dynamic relationship. Uh, and so many of Doom's stories sort of explore that question you're asking of like, how can this guy with all of this power he has, he's got his own country, how can he have all of this stuff and still be so desperately unhappy with his position in the world and want more and want to prove that he is better than this other guy who lives on the other side of the world. And I was gonna say maybe not even thinking, maybe doesn't even think about him as much as he does, but maybe they think about each other the same amount. It's hard to tell.
Well, this is all Mr. Fantastic's fault. If he could just stop and leave, Doom would be happy in his life area, and all the problems would have been solved a long time ago.
Definitely, we got to blame Mr. Fantastic for everything.
The other interesting thing about with Doom, historically speaking, tyrants oppose education for their citizens. And so it seems like because of the idea that an educated populace usually would revolt against it. But Doom is pushing the idea of education. He wants to see people educated and healthy.
Mhm.
Why does he not fear an educated populace?
I think a lot of what Doom's doing in this first issue is the bread and circuses part. He wants people to like him. He wants to have them on his side, and so he's giving them what they want. Um, and I also think, and this is me speaking, not Doom, I think that Doom is smart enough to not fear an educated populace. I think he has enough ego to think that if people only go along with his policies because they're kept in such ignorance that they can't determine how they're bad, that's not a policy worthy of Doom. Doom is the greatest guy, right? So there's a certain amount of ego. I say certain amount. There is a lot of amount of ego in Doom, and Doom can often be somewhat self-defeating in that ego. Literally in Fantastic Four number 7, where he fails to, and this is slight spoilers of that issue, but large spoilers of that issue actually, he fails to do better than what Reed did with the problem. And he's going through this time loop trying to over and over again to get past it, and he can't. And eventually, when he accepts that failure, that he cannot do this, it's so antithetical to his entire being that he would rather erase himself from existence forever, having gone down this road, than allow that idea that he is not superior to infect him. So Doom's ego is, I think it's fair to say, core to who this guy is. And it makes him very fun to write because ego is such a great motivator, but also it blows up in your face so often that there's a lot of fun there.
I think another interesting about Doctor Doom is his, I guess, on some level, elasticity of thought. I mean, here's someone who is steeped in science, but is also, I believe, now the Sorcerer Supreme as well.
Yes.
And the idea that he can equally hold the ideas of science and magic at the same time is an incredible mental gymnastics I think most people can't do, wouldn't be able to do.
Yeah, he's great. I mean, before I even knew I was writing Fantastic Four, or was even on my radar, I wrote a book called How to Take Over the World, which is a nonfiction book of how to pull off supervillain plots in the real world with actual science and technology. So no shrink rays, no mind control helmets, but like how can we actually build a floating base, stuff like that. And in the introduction to that book, I wrote that Doctor Doom was the ultimate supervillain, and it was for the reasons you mentioned there. He is a master of science and also a master of magic. Plus, he dresses like a scary robot in a cape. So he's the complete package. And it's funny, there's not a lot of characters like him in fiction. I think there's not really any other character quite like Doctor Doom in fiction, where he can do stuff that for anyone else would seem arch or camp or almost silly. But because it has such a competent malice behind it, such a threat, that when Doom looks at you and speaks in the third person and says, Doom suggests you reconsider that response, you go, oh shit. Well, if I did it and said Ryan North suggests you reconsider that response, you'd be like, why is Ryan North talking like Ryan North is here in the room with us? and there's two Ryan Norths, it's just one guy. So he's great. He is a credible threat and one of the few people who can do it all. He can do it all.
So
His first appearance, he sends people back in time, the Fantastic Four back in time to steal Blackbeard's gold for him. Like that's an amazing way to introduce yourself to anyone.
so you wrote a book about how to take over the world. So are you Doctor Doom?
No, no, I'm far too humble.
'Cause, I mean, that's one of the interesting problems with Doctor Doom. You have to be smart enough to write Doctor Doom because Doctor Doom has to be the smartest man in the room at all times. You need to be smart enough to write it, which has got to be stressful as a writer trying to live up to what he has to be.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm also writing Reed Richards, and you have to be smart enough to write him as well. And I'll tell you the secret to writing genius characters is that you give them a time limit. And so they have to come up with a brilliant idea to save the world or to take it over in a short amount of time. But you've got a month. You have a month to go on walks and be like, oh, how could I do this? And let me research this and let me do all that stuff. I don't think, I mean, there's many flavors of genius, of course, but one of the ways you can write a genius character while yourself not being a genius is exploiting the advantage that you have a month, sometimes many months to think of every single thing they say, while everyone else in the fiction universe doesn't have that time. So they're the ones being like, I have the answer, bam, bam, bam. And you have done hours and hours of research to come up with that answer that no one will ever see. And this works even in real life. If you have time to maintain a correspondence over email, you've got a day or two for each response. Do a little research there and think of a smart thing to say. Really impress your friends until they meet you in person and realize that, oh, that's just Ryan. He's just a guy. And then the illusion shatters and crumbles.
Well, the other interesting about the series is that us that it obviously starts like right in the middle with him already ruling the world. I mean,
Mhm.
you basically started the story on some level 6 issues in. It feels like I'm saying like he's already got to the point where he won.
Yep.
And that's obviously the mystery surrounding much of the first issue is how did he get to power? So in your how soon are we going to have the answer to that question?
You will have the answer to that question relatively soon, certainly in the first half of the story. Um, yeah, I think I should stop there.
Well, the next couple of question you probably can't answer, but feel free to dodge as much as you wish.
Please.
So I'm going to go to them. So the suggestion in the first issue that this happened so suddenly that even the heroes are unaware of how this could have happened. Um, so what happens if Doom's reign actually is legitimate? If he actually did on some level earn it? I mean, are they the heroes then the villains at this point?
Well, there's a question I absolutely can't answer. That is that is the story you're reading. Um, yeah. Stay tuned, I'd say, if we're on TV, but we're not. We're in comics, so keep reading.
One more quick question, this which you're probably going to dance around, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Because I think an interesting question this book obviously brings up, once again, because of the heroes, is who speaks for the regular citizen? Doom,
Mhm.
the heroes, or do the people have the right to say they speak for themselves? In other words, Doom actually is doing a good job. We're fine with it. Keep it going. Or do the heroes have to know better? Or if they feel like they know better, say, guys, the people you're wrong in this. We're just going to stop them regardless of how this is playing out for you guys. Who has the right to speak for the people being ruled at this point?
Yeah. I think one thing to keep in mind is that people are a plurality, and democracy is the chorus of many voices, and everyone's pulling in a slightly different direction. And you never really get to speak for people. You get to speak for your impression of what the people want. And usually it's an impression that helps you in what you're trying to accomplish. So it is, but these questions of like justice and uh, power and the right to wield it are stories that are issues rather that this story is interrogating a little bit as we go through it. So I'm really glad. I feel bad I can't give you solid answers to these questions. We're just in the first chapter of the story, but I am really glad that the first issue has raised these questions in your mind because it is something that the story is there to explore. So it makes me feel like it's at least doing my job
Well,
at a fundamental level decently.
well, we gotta meet again in 7 to 8 months to dive into the answer to these questions as well. So,
That'd be great. I would so love to be able to talk about this without having to excise all these details from it because it is something that I've had in my head since 2003, and I won't be able to talk about it until we are done the year. So
well,
let's do it.
I'm going to hold you to that. I'm actually going to bother you in probably 7 to 8 months. So be prepared.
All
Um,
right.
I think another thing I really like about this issue. So Doom, obviously, Doom has murdered any number of people in his lifetime. I mean, I'm not saying he's not like I don't know if he's Joker level of how many people he's murdered, but he's probably pretty high up,
Killed a
kind of
bunch.
surpassed them, huh? He's probably in that.
He's killed a bunch, yeah.
Right. But what I like most about Doom is that he still views Zemo and Red Skull, the Nazis, as being the actual evil. He's like, I killed this many, but that is fucked up. These two guys are fucked up. And I like that. I think that's a great character trait of the character. And can you kind of dive into how even for Doom, those two characters are evil?
Yeah, I mean, they're Nazis.
Yeah.
They are members of Hydra, runners, rulers of Hydra, and he is a Romani man. So there is, I think, an obvious reason why he wouldn't like them, and sort of the different flavors of when trying to write for Doom, there's different flavors of brilliance. And what I kind of liked in this when this one where he does go and he kills Baron Zemo and the Red Skull, and he's like, look, these have been a problem. These Nazis have been a problem since World War II, and I took over the world and killed them in a day. Like I am getting results. And it works as Doom as a character being like, yeah, these guys suck. I'm taking care of it. But it also works in kind of this fun meta comics way where the reason these characters have been around since World War II, since the 40s, is that they're bad guys and we want to have bad guys around. And so they never quite leave the picture. And that's one of the constraints of the narrative form is that these bad guys will return. You can kill the Joker, but he's always going to come back because we like the Joker and want him in our stories so we can have a bad guy to show us the error of our ways and all that good stuff. And so Doom is breaking the narrative convention there of the genre where he kills them right off the bat. No mercy. And part of me is like, oh, I didn't know you could do that, Doctor Doom. It feels like you're breaking an unwritten rule of your universe and you're just, waltzing right over it like it isn't even there. And to me, that gave him a sense of power that almost transcended the story that he's in. Like he is the one character who can go and be like, yeah, these guys suck. They're Nazis. They're dead. I took care of it. You're welcome. Bye. And it's something that nobody else can do because nobody else is going to think on such a large level that he will actually transcend the rules of the genre he's in, which
I
it's
mean,
sort of meta, but I like it.
I think that's kind of like a weird dissociativeness with Doom, because Doom may or may not have a higher body count than Zemo and Red Skull, considering his power level, depending. But it's the fact that his murders are indiscriminate versus racially charged that makes his murders better, according to Doom. I guess is how that works mentally. Just a very
Yeah.
interesting psychology.
Yeah, I mean he's killed the Red Skull and Baron Zemo, and these are not good men. And there's that, the classic argument in comics of like, hasn't Batman harmed more people by allowing the Joker to stay alive and keep his killing? If he just killed this one man, he'd prevent the Joker from killing hundreds, maybe thousands of people. And it's a fun hypothetical argument, but it doesn't really work because if Batman kills the Joker, that changes the story and changes Batman and obviously changes the Joker. We're in a new uncharted territory that we don't necessarily want to be in. Um, but Doom can just kill these guys and justify it. So I think in his mind, it is entirely justified, and it may well be justified objectively if you have someone who is running around ruling Hydra, killing that person. might do the most good in the world. This is a question for philosophers, not for me or comic book writers, but it is something that I think Doom could very easily use to justify his position.
So how about other villains like Magneto, who also has a massive body count? Um, are they next in line? Does Doom have a hit list of characters that he's gonna be looking towards?
I can't give you spoilers.
I, so another interesting dilemma as a writer is that this is an event book. This isn't just a Fantastic Four and Doctor Doom story. This is an event book. So you're dealing with any number of characters. So how hard is it to write a story of this scale? How do you balance the arcs of, at the moment, there's minimum 15 characters that are showcased in this one book. And does each character then have to have a satisfying arc that's being introduced?
Yeah, that's a big question. One of the things that I realized as I was writing is that I kind of had to give myself permission to go big. One of the unique things about writing a monthly comic for something like Marvel or DC is that you're writing in a shared universe, and that shared universe is all happening at the same time in a bunch of other books. And so, for example, if I blow up the moon in the pages of Squirrel Girl, that should affect what's happening everywhere else in the world that month because the moon isn't there anymore. That's something that Spider-Man might comment upon, or the Fantastic Four might try to fix. And so when you're writing a normal book, there are these sort of guardrails of things you won't do because it ruins it for everyone else. I can't destroy the earth. I can't, I don't know, turn everyone into a frog and not change them back. But when you're writing an event book, you kind of have the keys to the whole universe. And so you can do these larger status quo changes, like Doctor Doom was taking over the world, that then can be reflected in everyone else's books that's planned so far out in advance. So I realized I had to sort of stop preventing myself mentally from doing these big swings, these big ideas, because this is the one chance you have to do it. Um, and that was interesting. It was sort of like you ever wear a shoe that's a little too small and it's fine, it hurts, but it's fine for, and then when you take it off, suddenly you're like, oh my God, so much better. It felt a bit like that, like taking off a tight piece of clothing, be like, okay, now we can really do some stuff here.
And I think the other question that everyone always has when it comes to an event book is the repercussion of this book going forward. Everyone's always wondering, and there's always a tagline. It feels like every couple of months is a book, things will never be the same.
Changes
Um,
everything. Yeah.
yeah. So how, when you write this book, how much leeway did you have to make things never be the same again?
I think infinite. There was nothing I was told not to do. And when we were discussing ideas in the room, there's a Marvel summit every once in a while that we get together and talk about stories. Um, there was no limit. There was blue sky, I think, which I really appreciate. It's the major concern, I think, with anyone writing a story, whether it's the writers or the editors or anyone in the process, they want to tell a really good story. And the worst thing you can say about basically any piece of entertainment is that it's boring, because no one wants to be bored. And as much as I talked about having, blinders for the scale of the kind of things I could do normally in a book, there was never the sort of parallel blinders for the excitement of the book. You can always make the book as exciting as you want and do the crazy thing you can to make it worth reading, to make it satisfying. So, yeah, I mean, everyone wants their story to change everything. Everyone wants to say it'll never be the same. Um, but you heard it here first. This story does have repercussions. Things change because of what's happening. You already see them changing in the first issue. Like there's stuff happening that is there and can't easily be rewound into something else. So it's fun and exciting to
Now,
be involved in that.
I mean, obviously, the title character is Doctor Doom, but that doesn't necessarily make him the protagonist of the nine issues. Reed Richards obviously is the arch foe of Doom on some levels, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be automatically the protagonist because Doom has touched so many different heroes over the course of his 60 years of existence. In your to your mind, is Doom the protagonist of the series, or which character would you say is the protagonist?
It depends how you define protagonist, but it's to me it's Doom. He's the star of the story, and I mean minor spoilers for issue two. It's basically a bonus Fantastic Four issue where they're like, all right, Doom is our guy. He's our bad guy. They don't say it, but that's their thinking. We need to fix this. So let's go do that. Other heroes get their chance down the road. But the one connecting part of all of it is Doctor Doom and his relationships with the other heroes. His goddaughter Valeria is a big part of the second issue. Um, she basically confronts him and says, "What the hell are you doing? This is crazy." And Doom says, "Well, let me tell you what I'm doing. Let me justify it to you. Let me convince you that this is the right approach." I love their relationship between Doctor Doom and Valeria Richards because on paper it should never work. This idea of, okay, so there's these two guys who really they're huge rivals, and then one will be the goddaughter to the other guy's daughter, or the godfather to the guy's daughter. And you're like, well, why would that ever happen? Why would he consent? Why would any of this ever happen? Because it's so fraught. But we found a way to make it happen in comics, and it's so rich that he can hate this man and love his daughter like his own. Is just one of my favorite relationships in comics.
Well, I really like that you kind of have in the world of superheroes be like, this is your guy, you deal with it, or like this is your role gallery, this is your your problem. That it's just it's not such a fun concept.
Yeah, I mean it's as much as we've been talking about like heady concepts of power and fairness. It's a fun book. I think the premise of Doctor Doom taking over the world overnight is a fun premise. You get to do fun stuff with that. Cool fights, big explosions, awesome punches, all this stuff that we sort of love, that we do literally love in comics. You can have while also having him take over the world and dealing with that seriously. It's one of the things I love most about the medium is he can do so many things at once and hit so many registers all at the same time.
So, what can the listeners look forward to in upcoming issues of One World Under Doom?
Well, I gave you some teeny spoilers for issue two, where there's a important conversation between Doom and Valeria, and I guess it's not. I can talk about what's in the solicits, which we've done up to issue four, I believe, maybe five. Um, there is a showdown coming up between Doctor Doom and Dormammu, which is great because Dormammu is an incredibly powerful person, even against the Sorcerer Supreme. And those two are not going to get along very well. It's a really fun issue with that story in it.
Well, like I said, I find this event just a very exciting storyline. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing where you go with it. Mr. North, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you. And when it gets closer to the end of the series, we got to have this conversation again and get and dive into those questions you couldn't get to this time.
I'm absolutely looking forward to that. I'm so excited to talk with this and give you not have to dodge around a bunch of questions. Give you the straight dope.
Thank
Go
you so much,
through.
sir. Have a fantastic night.
My pleasure. You too.